Hello lords and ladies of the internet, I'm the King of Candor, and today I'll be giving you 10 tips for game mastering I wish I knew when I started. Tip number 1 is don't sweat the small stuff. What this means is there are going to be a lot of minor details in the game you play which will not matter. If an enemy got a +3 to hit instead of a 4, or you can't remember if the big boss was named Mike or Michael, that's okay. Agonizing over the tiny details is something I did at first, and it nearly drove me away from game mastering. The small details may or may not come back up, and it's okay for you to make a few minor mistakes. Just ask my players about accents. I can't do one to save my life, and my Russian accent and German accent frequently flow into each other. However, it's okay. They understand that you're trying to put on a show for them, and that I'm trying to help them, and if I spent hours just practicing accents, I wouldn't have the time to work on the rest of the stuff throughout the week. If you spend all your time agonizing over small details, you won't be able to plan for the big stuff. Tip number 2 is learn to improvise. Improvisation is a very tough skill to learn. However, it'll be very important for you being a game master. The only reason this isn't tip number 1 is because I don't want you to think that you have to know everything. Now, back to improvisation. This skill is difficult to explain. You need to practice it by coming up with answers quickly. Overthinking problems is one of the biggest failures that I see in new game masters. Being constantly ready for new situations and the unexpected outcomes is the hardest part about being a game master. That is also the only skill that you have to learn, and I can't really teach you. Something I can give you is advice, which is you don't have to be wacky or correct. It's okay to have something mundane as a response. Not every blacksmith needs to be this masterclass juggler who's basically a hibachi chef, but with arrow making who's also a blue gnome. Doing things like that will trip you up. Instead, answer the questions simply with a boring detail. As a game master, something I did that really helped me improve my improv was understand my world and the characters, which leads directly to tip number 3. Tip number 3, make sure you plan. The important detail is to remember that planning can only get you so far. You have one encounter to keep track of, one brain, and one way you look at a problem. While playing, you have about 4 players on average, sometimes more. My table has up to 7 players, for example. You do not have the brain capacity of 7 people. I don't care how smart you are, so don't worry about planning for everything. You need to understand what is going on well enough so that you can improvise. A good example is understanding what a character wants. You don't have to do this for everybody, but let's say you have an NPC who is supposed to show up temporarily. Let's make him a guard who explains to the players what the quest is, and then he's supposed to go back to town. The players are going to ask him more questions than he could possibly be prepared for. You could obviously try to prepare his entire life story with a wife and kids, and maybe go through some of his history and the history of the town and his first love and his schools, but that's not going to be something that you might use, and it's probably a waste of your time. I would suggest focusing on the guard's personality more. If he's friendly and affable, he should encourage the players to get it done quickly and offer to buy them a drink at the bar when it's done. It's much easier to improvise if you know how the person is, not so much their history, which is something I highly suggest you do. The same thing goes for encountering things in the world that you not be ready for, and some of the shenanigans the players have. Yeah, something I find funny is one time my players went to a small town to try to find the blacksmith. I assumed it was to get some weapons, so I said, sure, there's a blacksmith, he has some weapons on sale. However, the players actually wanted to get some ball bearings from him, so they could use to create this tripping hazard as they went inside the house. The blacksmith just doesn't have ball bearings, but I told them they could get some round marbles from the general store. This was all improvised. Nowhere in my notes did I have something written down saying, the general store carries marbles. My 4th tip is only build what you're going to use. I see a lot of people get caught up in designing their entire world, and they get needlessly bogged down in the details. It really doesn't matter what the Court of the Elves is like if the elves are not going to show up until the end of the campaign. You will find that over-preparing for stuff is going to be a common problem. Sometimes you'll get blindsided and didn't prepare what the players did, and they'll bypass some of the content you also worked on, but for the most part, I find people over-design their setting. If you're designing your own world or campaign, start small. I suggest you start in the opening town or area, and then maybe design 10 or so miles around it, tops. Heck, I wouldn't even do that much if I was running my game for the first time, and I was trying to understand what's going on. Usually you just need the first dungeon and the nearby town to get going. All you need to do is make sure you have enough content in the world that the players have a few sessions worth of fun. Anything past that is just gravy for them, and it's work that you don't have to do later. You can always add more stuff. It's much harder to remove things than add once. Remember that. Tip number 5 is reuse what you don't use. You'll find out that a lot of the stuff you've designed for your players goes unused. I have this poor Red Bandit faction that I've never gotten to use. I've put them in 6 campaigns. They're kind of fun, I think. They all have these bandanas around their heads that basically act as a health potion, and if they get hurt or die, it'll activate and revive them once. They also have swords, which cause bleeding damage every attack, that stacks up, which makes them kind of lethal. Every time I've hinted about these guys, they get ignored. Or the setting wraps up before the players get to them. Or the players just pay somebody else to deal with it. One time, they paid a dragon to wipe them out, which is pretty smart and funny, but kind of annoying when I had this really cool encounter planned. I suggest you reuse any content, and the best part is, players don't know what you didn't show them. Just file off the serial numbers and reuse it. If the encounter was with 2 elf wizards, and you're in a place now with a lot of gnomes, now those wizards become gnome wizards, and it fits the environment better. My next piece of advice is to make a few characters of each race or culture that you can use on the fly. Think something like having a handful of elf and dwarf NPCs if you're setting your game in the Middle-earth environment. For my home game, I try to have 2 or 3 of each race ready. You could also switch some of these with their races on the fly. If I have a dwarven smith, I might make him an elven smith if we're in elven lands. This also helps you be ready in case players have a character they want to talk to that you did not plan for. But having a handful of NPCs that you have previously built will really help you if you ever get into a situation where you need to pull a couple characters out quickly that are more complicated than a simple name. I also find pre-generated characters from adventure modules are fantastic for this. Usually when you buy these books, or your players want to play them, you get a handful of pre-made people that fit the setting okay, but the party doesn't always want to do that. A lot of players want to make their own person, so I reuse them as NPCs for people and in future content. Tip number 7 is built off the previous tip, and it's keep a list of names. These names will come up whenever you need to make an NPC on the fly. This usually means that they're a quick NPC, just a name and a job with a small backstory. You can flesh them out later after the session if needed. I try to keep different cultural names for this. Think of stuff like if you're in a desert environment, have some Egyptian or Arabic sounding names to really help sell the theme to players. If you're in a cold environment or the far north, I usually have Russian and Scandinavian names. Sometimes a name alone will give you ideas for the NPC. If you call somebody Thor and they're a warrior, you probably want to give them a hammer weapon and make them a fighter. Or maybe they have lightning magic and they're a wizard. Remember, you are writing for your friends and playing at your table. You don't have to worry about everything being this brand new creation nobody's seen before. It's okay to play into obvious things or stereotypes to keep it fun and understandable for your friends. My 8th tip is to keep a couple of character traits written down. I will sometimes write things such as arrogant or brave or gluttonous. These shorthands will help you remember how an NPC behaves, and it will be valuable. I also suggest having a couple of unassigned ones to pair with some of those names that you have earlier. A great source of these is actually Crusader Kings. You don't have to buy the game, but go to the Wikipedia page and read through these traits and see how they work. Some provide debuffs, some provide buffs. It's very easy to understand and something you can do. Something else I suggest a lot of people do is to have an accent written down. Steal from celebrities for this part. If you try to make a character sound like a normal elf who's French, you might not get it right, and it's going to be kind of funny how it's going wrong. However, if you make them sound like Christopher Walken, that's going to be very memorable and fun. One of my favorite enemies I made is a wizard who talks exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was quite funny to have this guy casting Fireball while screaming at the players. Tip number 9 is do not feel bad about calling for a break. If you're tired and need to collect your mind real quick, or maybe you just don't know how a situation will resolve and the player is completely blindsided you, ask the group to take 5 while you think about it. You are completely in the right to need some time to consider something and to realign yourself and to make sure that you give it the right choice. Building on this, try to say yes as much as possible. Don't worry if you have to say no though. Understand that the game is about players making choices. That doesn't mean you must give them a yes to everything they want. A good example of this is in my home game. One of my players wanted to play a robot. He found a third-party book that had robots as a race. It was pretty well balanced and actually was pretty fun looking. However, the fantasy game that they were playing had no robots or even golems around. There was no technology in the world. I understand why my player wanted to do this, but I told him that I didn't want to alter the game world too much, and he understood. Lots of Game Master advice videos will tell you to try to say yes more. However, I think that's because a lot of older Game Masters came from a style which was way more confrontational and harsh. Modern games tend to be more friendship focused and are designed with the same group of people in mind, your friends usually. Then you kind of want to say yes to your friends and engage in their ideas, but this can be problematic for your own world. This part is definitely more art than science, but the way I look at it is, try to say yes to all the random suggestions or ideas they have, while still making sure to keep the world intact and the rules balanced. Tip number 10 is have fun. This kind of seems like an obvious tip or a corny one you expect people to throw in, but I'm deadly serious here. If you're not enjoying the game and you find it miserable to run, your players will also hate it. Maybe it's a specific choice you made that's causing you a headache, such as giving out an item that's too powerful. Just ask the players to hand the item back over and tell them it's making you not want to play. Maybe you just don't like the system you're running, or you're burnt out. Talk to your players and let them know what's going on. I've been running games for about 10 years. I have taken breaks in that time period, but not for very long. And it's nice when my players step up and allow me to sit back as a player and a game master for a while, because I can recharge my batteries and go experience new worlds and recharge my creativity. That is all I have for today. Thank you for watching this far. I could easily make more videos like this. Let me know if you like it. If you enjoyed the content, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. I'm looking forward to your candor in the comments below, and have a great day.